norm. But as a physically impaired student, she gives voice to a group of citizens who historically have not had full access to the university. She's a literature major from Los Angeles, California, Bita.
Going to the Cal graduations, the non-traditional speaker was announced, and before he or she emerged at the podium, I would conjure the person out. What immediately would strike me was the strong value that is placed on tradition at Cal, and then to think of the word non-traditional in terms of that. The non-traditional person was probably someone whom none of us knew of, probably few of us had ever seen, who was apart from our tradition. This person was someone who had a separate scheme of activities than those in which most people at Cal were engaged. It was someone who had 2 children, was divorced, and had a job. They never lived in the dorms, nor had they eaten at Saga. They hadn't gone to the Cal fountain dances or Cal college night. I had never spent any time at the Cal fishbowl nor stayed in the Cal coffee shop till closing time because they had to be up for work the next morning. That person had never spent the day studying on this very courtyard, taking a break now and then to admire the glorious view for a few seconds, or maybe visit briefly with a friend or two. The non-traditional speaker, which I conjured up, was always someone who saw these activities as superfluous. They were someone who was a serious academician because he or she knew the value of an education. Non-traditional meant someone who was admired, who brought a glitter to your eye and got a standing ovation. It was someone who got up here and finally had their moment where they could at last be seen wholly, individually, apart from the vast conglomeration in which they would otherwise remain invisible. A handful of sand in which each grain cannot be seen for itself. The handful thought of in terms of a single description such as wet or coarse. Non-traditional speaker would then provide an opportunity for an individual to be acknowledged for his or her achievements. I feel kind of weird that I'm not able to represent that single working mom or re-entry student, but I guess maybe that's my point. By having a fixed, informed idea of what non-traditional was, I wasn't giving myself or anyone else a chance. Once again, there was a tradition established for non-traditionality. I thought how making this speech would put a great responsibility on me, trying to represent the tradition of non-traditionality. Eventually, making it seem for myself, after pondering every non-traditional case I could think of, that I was to represent everybody and their grandmothers. I often wonder if everyone does not see themselves as apart from the tradition of which they are supposed to be a part. I wonder if everyone does not feel this sense of being torn between the category, the handful of sand in which they are seen, and the inappropriateness they feel at being a part of that group. Does everyone else also feel like hard-boiled eggs underwater trying to bounce out, or feel like they're in some kind of garment that won't fit just right, and are constantly being self-conscious as to whether some part of their body is sticking out? Coming from an immigrant family and growing up disabled, I had a pretty schizophrenic time trying to fit into tradition. People don't always know that you're Iranian assume you're part of their American tradition when you haven't had the chance to be marked by an accent. And when you're growing up in the late 70s, you don't go out of your way to make it really obvious. Then there's the gap and confusion when you come home from school and from your American friends and are confused as to where you fit into your tradition and culture in your Iranian home. Then there's the question of where you are to fit into your disabled tradition. That there must be some integrity you need to be holding up for the rest of your disabled comrades. I often wonder whether it's just me or that everybody feels that way. Feels like bobbing out of her seat to be recognized apart from the tradition. Cal College graduating class of 1989, as apart from the tradition of chairs arranged in a square on the upper courtyard. It's quite exhilarating to be given the opportunity to bounce out of one's seat if one has a good fortune as seeing it as such. I guess the danger that I've been fearing is that it might not be seen as such, but that the whole thing will perpetuate within itself, like cleaning mud up by spreading it around with a cloth. That there will be another tradition formed, the tradition of non-traditionality, and then someone would have to work to break out of that tradition. And who knows what kind of faction will be created then. But this is the problem one inevitably runs into when using words. In other words, when one tries to be too precise about matters, to make them precisely agree with what they think it should be. So there is a tug, a balancing out between how we have categorized things and how they will be. Then, we soon have to devise methods for poking them back in the water, coming around from different directions, hoping that that one will be the one to sink it. I would say let them float. I wish every one of you someday the opportunity to bounce. Thank you.